Hey everyone, every year someone asks the question of why people still play DBD. It's a game which has a lot of success, yet a lot of people equally question that success quite a bit. It's called buggy, toxic, poorly optimized, unbalanced, and so on. Lots of buzzwords. But something the game is yet to do is die, despite all of these perceptions. So why is this? I recently watched this Rapid Main video, as you can probably tell from the title, which asked this very question, of why do people still play Dead by Daylight. It's a really well done breakdown that I highly recommend you check out. Today I want to share my thoughts, as I know I've given this question a lot of thought over the years, as I've had periods of love, periods of and periods of dislike for the game. Never quite hatred, mind you. I think that's something I could never do. I'm going to cover 5 reasons. First reason why I still play Dead by Daylight is the variety and uniqueness present in the game. This is something too, mind you, that I think has existed far before the current day. I think even from the early days of the game it had variety in mind, it had options. That's one of the reasons I think, at least for DBD's success, is the options it gives you from the get-go, which are now more present than ever. It's rumoured that DBD was originally going to release with just Trapper, which would have completely killed it dead in its tracks, I think at least. In the same way it would have if survivors were forced to only use their teachable perks, or there was just one map. It would have been awful. Scale this to the present day with so much present in the game, it's almost impossible to not find something you like, even if almost the entire roster of characters does not interest you. I'm sure for each of you watching this there is at least one which does. The same goes for perks and add-ons, and all the different ways you're able to engage with variety and creativity. In fact, that's a good way to put it. Dead by Daylight is quite a creative game to play if you let it be. Variety and the allowance of creativity is the core reason for DBD's success in my opinion. The game as it is in 2024 is essentially just a big sandbox, and it sort of always has been. It's just been fleshed out over the years. The beauty of the Entities realm is that literally anything can happen inside of it, and so the potential is really just endless. Second reason is the community, and actually the lack of toxicity, which I'm sure is going to raise some alarm bells for some of you. I've never liked the narrative though that the game is toxic. I don't think it is, and I actually think comparatively to the majority of other PvP communities, DBD is pretty tame. I think the reason for much of the game's issues in this regard too is the marred line of DBD's purpose. Is it casual or competitive? Unlike a game like Counter-Strike or Rainbow Six though, the case for DBD is that it's neither. It's sort of up to the player, in my opinion. My mindset, at least when solo queuing as Survivor, is not to expect everyone to be running full meta and trying their very hardest, like you would in a competitive game. I know I personally try to vary my builds, I largely solo queue, I have my game volume incredibly low, I watch videos or films whilst I play, and rarely am fully focused. I play the game pretty casually is what I'm saying, but I also don't try to actively throw, and I also don't mind too much how other people play either, and I don't think a lot of other people do. I actually think if you ask most people, they are not that concerned with winning every game or escaping or 4King or whatever. There are 2 things most people want, which is BP and to feel some sense of accomplishment in the match, even if it's just a moment of, damn, I made a good play there. DBD has no rank system that matters. Its MMR is not even visible. Much of the toxicity in game is simply just interpreting another player's actions as such. Like a teabag or a point, they all mean different things to different people. Watch this. What did that survivor mean? From the killer's perspective, they might think, oh, they're pointing to annoy and agitate me, when the survivor was actually just pointing out the killer to their unaware teammate. Granted, this is not always the case, but my point is when getting annoyed by something like this, you're doing it almost entirely on your own, assuming the meaning behind what they're doing. I faced streamers before, for example, and had them point or teabag mid-chase, and I felt annoyed. Checked out their VOD, and it turns out they were just having fun. There was no malintent, they were just pointing, they thought it was just funny that that was the depth there. The other way has happened too, where I'm doing something in-game I don't think is toxic, like a playful nod toward a Survivor TTV. Then I go to their stream and they ramble about how toxic I am. They're nodding at me, they're all that kind of stuff. It's all just a made-up language that no one has the same rules or translation for, and this makes up a lot of the argument arguments for the game's perceived toxicity. DBD has very little actual toxicity in-game, with it actually being quite hard to do aside the endgame chat. Does it happen? Of course, it's an online PvP game, but it's definitely not as bad as people say it is, which is why I like it a lot. Looking outside of games 2 and the wider community, I do think it's a very welcoming and inclusive one. Third reason, DBD's core gameplay is actually really good. Simple fun. I will preface this by saying that I got into DBD by sort of a fluke. When I started the game, I really did not care much about horror. Films, games, TV shows, whatever, I barely engage with horror. DBD on paper is not really for me, but that's sort of why I think it's found such success, in that a lot of people are in the same place as me. They've found the same thing. The game and its core gameplay is just really fun, and also really easy to understand, even just by the terms given to each role or side. Survivor, you have to survive. Killer, you have to kill. That's really all you need to know at a core level, and the rest you can sort of figure out over time. Over time, I've grown to love many of the licenses and horror as a whole, to be honest, even though it's still not really my favourite genre. At its core, DBD's gameplay is simply fun, and it just works. And it always has, whether it was back when the game did have more of a typical horror, hide-and-seek focus, to today's much heavier focus on looping and use of resources. The core has always been the same, and the core has always stayed strong and kept me playing. Both sides are still a lot of fun for me, and it doesn't take much effort to engage with or play. You can put in as much effort as you want to for DBD's gameplay, I think, which is what makes this fact work to an even greater extent when it comes to why I continue to play it. When I go to boot up Elden Ring, say, I sort of need to be in the mood to play Elden Ring, and get ready to embrace that challenge. When it's DBD, I feel I can literally jump in whenever, which is amazing. It's always there, it's always consistent fun, even if it's not my pick for the greatest game of all time or anything. DBD excels with its gameplay loop, which is always consistent, reliable, and fun. Fourth reason, the lore and characters. This is something likely a little less agreed upon, as I know lots of people just don't really engage with this stuff or care at all, which is fine too. I'm sure though if you've watched my videos before, you probably have at least a little interest in this stuff. This has really been the core aspect of the game that has kept me coming back and kept me interested as a creator. I probably wouldn't have stuck with the game as long as I have if the lore wasn't there, because I just wouldn't have enough to talk about. The world of Dead by Daylight is something I personally really love because it's so open to interpretation and free to do with as you please, which does seem to be what the developers want for it too. Their philosophy for Survivors was always to create characters that players can project themselves onto and relate to in some way. I've always gotten the impression that this was the goal with the wider game, was to allow players to make up theories, headcanons, and various interpretations for what's present in game. This is why I personally do so much of this, because it's what I enjoy most about the game. It's why I make up silly theories or make lots of tier lists and breakdowns of the lore and characters, many of which I'll combine with my own theories or ones I've heard, because that's the best part of the game for me. I just love the openness, the ability to interpret almost anything in the lore. The fact that the lore doesn't really have a specific canon necessarily can be annoying at times, but for the most part I think it's great. You don't go to the lore and come away with one interpretation or perspective. Pretty much everyone who engages with it and the world of DBD comes away with their own view on what they think about it and the characters inside. What got me hooked on the lore originally was the small pieces of flavor text present in the game back when I started in 2019. The small segments that mentioned characters like Benedict, Vigo, or just made reference to lost characters in the realm through the lost tapes or simply through item descriptions. The world was so mysterious and you largely had to fill in the blanks. We do get more lore now, but it's still very much like that, a fill in the blanks experience, which I think is very cool. No one reads it quite the same and no one's necessarily right. Fifth and final reason, this one does overlap a little with Rapid Main's video too, which is the game's constant strive to better itself. People really like to throw around certain things about the developers, saying they don't care or they don't work hard enough on the game, and I think it's kind of crazy to throw that around when you look at the game back in 2016 compared to now, and even compare year to year throughout its approaching 9-year existence. The game has consistently improved from day 1 to day 3085 on the day I upload this. The game has evolved with the times, it's improved, it's adapted, it's increased its roster and variety exponentially, but it's also never never lost itself in all this. Compare it to 2016 and sure there's difference, but it's still Dead by Daylight. This is actually quite unique too. Another game I mentioned earlier, Rainbow Six Siege, is criticized specifically for this reason, despite being around for a similar time. It's lost itself in its updates over the years. DBD has never done that. It's still DBD. I think it's a product of the game getting slowly better over time, that people forget the steps taken and forget the previous iteration of the game. Once you have something, your appreciation begins to go down as you get used to its presence, and so it's good to remind yourself and feel a sort of gratitude for how far the game has come. If the game had evolved as little as some people make out, it wouldn't be alive today, but the truth is that it has evolved quite a bit. Lots of people just forget. Has it done it slower than it could have? Sure, but it has consistently improved since day one, and to me that makes me want to stick around because it shows the people making the game are thinking about the future. They want the game to survive as much as I do, and ultimately what the wider community wants to. So there's my 5 reasons. Let me know yours too down below. I'm interested, and do go check out that Rapid Main video as well. It was very well made. And goodbye.